Good day, morning, evening, noon, whatever time that you're happening to view my YouTube video presentation. This is the EJ3 Perspective Show. It has been a long time since I've had a standalone presentation, particularly the EJ3 Perspective. I've obviously, if people are familiar with some of the things I like to do, I've posted a lot of video productions, video photo slide productions, etc. But in this particular video, I'm going to have what I'm entitling a conversation. The conversation is welcome. I mean, I'm welcoming anyone, as always, that of the YouTube community that wishes to view and then later on provide your perspective. Feedback is always welcome. But in particular, again, I said this is very anecdotal, but it will also be backed up. I may make factual references to things that's actually data, etc. But anyway, a large portion of it is just anecdotal, why ask why type questioning, thought musings, etc. So before I get into that, I'm just going to give a little bit of background about myself. When I say background now, I'm going to preface that by saying background in regards to prefacing, or framing, as a popular YouTube vlogger, Yvette Cornell says, who I respect also. But anyway, excuse me, framing, my point of reference before I get into it. Now, for me, in terms of my familiar background, or anyway, I have one of my niece is half African American, or more aptly a Black American DOS, descendant of slaves, and half East Indian. So I have that as a part of my extended family network. And also my daughter-in-law is Mexican extraction, originally born in Mexico, and particularly, or specifically, should I say, in San Luis de Potosi, Mexico. So I'm just adding that, so like, sort of give that little bit of a backdrop, only just to say, so like when I start asking these questions or whatever, it's not like I'm coming from no frame of reference. And I would also even add, even more so, my father, when he was in the service in World War II, he also was stationed and spent, a bit of time in the country of India. So I even have that bit of an aspect too, in terms of a background, so I can, know what I speak of or question or whatever. Okay, so let me get into it. And in a generalized sense, in America in particular, but not just America, really worldwide, people of sub-Saharan, primarily African descent, let's be blunt about it, are generally looked down upon for all the obvious reasons. I mean, I don't need to give people a history lesson or cultural perspectives or whatever. Everyone knows, everyone that's intelligent, most of the people that watch my video presentations know the deal with that, so I don't need to elaborate on that. But my why ask why is that when you think about it, let's just stick with some countries, sub-Saharan or all, I mean, not just sub-Saharan, but countries in Africa. In the scheme of things, Black Africans haven't done anything historically, overall, to other races and ethnicities, other non-white races and ethnicities. So specifically, let's talk about East Indians, let's talk about Sri Lankans, let's talk about Asians, whether they be Chinese, Japanese, etc., on down the line. As a whole, and in a general broad sense, Black people have not done anything negative to these races and ethnicities that I've just mentioned. Okay, somebody might say there might be particular cases. Okay, like since I mentioned Africa, they can talk about, the big thing is like to mention EJ Amin, which was a terrible situation. But there's some backdrop with that too. But again, I'm not going to elaborate on that because, but in a sense, okay, so you can say EJ Amin in the 70s, and the East Indians were kicked out of the country, their businesses were taken or whatever. I mean, in a crux, that's basically what happened, which was wrong or whatever, but that incident happened back in the 70s, and so that's a negative or whatever. But in terms of what the British, since we're going to stick with India and East Indians, did to all aspects of Indians in terms of their countries, and again, I'm not going to go into the history. You know it. People know it. In terms of what were done to the Indian people, in terms of being made into indentured servants, and in essence, like, slaves. You can call it indentured servants or whatever, but I mean, it was like slavery in a sense, except it was short term or time limited slavery or whatever. In a nutshell, a lot of evil was done by those that were the colonial powers, the white colonial powers, whether it be from England and some of the other countries. This was not done by people of African descent. You can only point to a few examples, like I just gave the one in terms of EJ Amin, which was very time limited in terms of like the years and what actually happened. You lost some businesses, people can lose a business and years later, you can become successful again, and I'm not making light of that, but I mean, it's an actuality. It's like, in some ways, I could liken it to like bankruptcy. I mean, there are many people that have been, have had to declare bankruptcy, and in a few years later, they're quite successful through hard work and through perseverance, etc. But again, I go back to saying, in the scheme of things, black people as a whole have not done the evil, dastardly things to East Indians that would merit them to have such hatred against, for example, the Africans that are students from the different African countries that have come to various universities and things in India, for example, and have such a hatred and violence directed toward them. There's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for that. And there's no way to excuse that. And I also, let me just preface by saying, I know the inner working dynamics of, like the caste system and all that. I mean, they sort of interplay in a way. I mean, in a broad sense, always lightness is looked upon, and I'm not just talking now just in terms of India, but just in any country, Mexico, which I sort of alluded to in terms of a backdrop, all countries, and all that all stems from, it's all sort of like something that has been indoctrinated to so-called people of color by the elites, which is which the white elites. And again, I'm not saying all, but I'm saying that the system, as some bloggers have caught up, have pointed out and sort of elaborated in a general sense to really outline that, such as Tariq Nasheed and others, Yvette Cornell, as I've already alluded to, and others have already alluded to that. So, I mean, that's one thing that's a ultimate bottom line. I mean, as a whole, black people have not done anything to East Indians. That same thing could be said to the Asian races, in particular, the Japanese, Japanese and Chinese, and here in America. And again, let me always say, not all, probably not most, but many, from my experience and observations and things that I've heard from other people that are black, have this attitude that, the superiority complex, and also have this hatred and dislike, but really, as you can say the same thing. I mean, black people as a whole, whether in America and the diaspora, across the world, have not done anything to warrant this type of vitriol that's directed against black Americans. If you take a look at the white colonial powers, again, going back to the same type of things that have happened to, that happened to India. I mean, those types of dynamics occurred, and as most people are well aware, to the various Asian countries that I've just alluded to. Yet and still, the ones that perpetrated this type of atrocities to your ancestors, your people, you know, they're not looked upon unfavorably or whatever, or, you know, they're forgiven or whatever. But like black people are looked down upon or hated, you know, disparaged or whatever. You know, that's something that you need to take a look at and be honest about. African American people, and in particular various African American organizations, have been, if anything, historically very sympathetic and empathetic to the various plights of the other non-white ethnic and racial minorities. Black organizations have supported things up to today, you know, in terms of, you know, the whole immigration issue and refugee things, actually to our detriment. And other people have elaborated that on length, because when the situation is reversed, there is then no widespread reciprocal support for other issues that affect the Black American DOS, descendant of slave issues. You know, no one, these other ethnic groups don't reciprocate in turn and offer support, whether it's even, you know, verbal or written support or whatever. You know, they're missing in action. So in essence, I just need to take, people to take a look at that. You know, don't take my word for it. I mean, you can just do your research and read and things or whatever. You know, if you can find some widespread things that, of a large scale level, like the cultural, the white elites have done historically throughout to these groups that I've just alluded to, you know, bring them out. You won't be able to find anything at that level. You just only in a historical base. You will find a few instances, but it's not like these were long-standing things. But yet, you know, just look at when I'll close this. Let's give another example. Just like the whole thing with Japan in World War II. The cities were bombed. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's the ultimate thing. You know, countries were bombed. Millions of people killed. But yet and still, some Japanese think that, have a very favorable opinion as a whole in just a broad sense of the white community. But, black people who have done nothing, have done anything of this magnitude, and have been magnanimous and been helpful and supportive, we're looked upon as evil and hated and scorned. I think people need to take a look at that. So this was like I said, informal musings that I just kind of put out there. I would feel free to hear your feedback and your perspective on that. And if you have historical examples of whatever, feel free to do so. So I appreciate you taking your time to view my YouTube video. Again, this is the EJ3 Perspective Show. I wish everyone peace and positivity as always. Take care until the next time. Peace and love.